imagine a lawyer. I'll still go for the extremes though, but I'll modify.
Well, go ahead.
Imagine a lawyer comes, without clothing, or engages in drunken disorderly conduct during the plenary, or drags the National Assembly into some sort of disrepute. Now, if we speak on the extent issue, on the issue at hand, this is the National Assembly, or the Senate, engaging in its constitutional functions and having those functions, the very level of engagement, the very essence of its existence, questioned, drawn, politicized, disparaged, and everything. At some point, somebody needs to be able to say, enough thus far and no further. We've had instances, for example, of people engaging in physical altercations during plenary. Somebody ought to be able to say, enough. At some point, somebody needs to be able to say, you know what, a committee of your peers are going to analyze your conduct and determine whether it meets up to the lofty ideals and requirements that we have, or it doesn't. Now, to specifically answer your question about Senator Remi Tinubu, I don't know. It doesn't. I'm not sure, but I do not recall her moving a motion and saying, you know what, following the orders of this honorable house, I feel that I have been disrespected and disparaged in such and such a manner by my colleague, and I would like to ask that leadership of the Senate refers this to our Ethics and Privileges Committee to ensure that whatever wrong that has been done to me is addressed. Now, I'm saying this. It doesn't come to my memory.
Yes, yeah, so let me refresh your memory a little bit. She escalated it even beyond the level of the National Assembly, even went to the Nigerian police force and said that her security was being threatened. So it went beyond the National Assembly. I believe within the National Assembly she asked for action to be taken at that particular time.
If there was a requirement for action to be taken at that point, I do believe the action should have been taken.
Well, let's quickly
right,
take, just a moment,
quickly.
Let me quickly take the reaction of Mr. Abayomi to that. Do you think that there will be instances, I mean, citing some of the extremes that he cited, shouldn't there be instances where discipline can be implemented?
Yeah, let us first appreciate that the legislative department is meant for normal people and sane people. The second point is that there's no law against the law of nature. You don't make a law that people should use the restroom. It's the law of nature. If a man comes to the National Assembly, for example, if a legislator becomes insane, you don't still suspend him. You take him to a psychiatrist. That's the law of nature. In other words, what I'm saying is,
if he becomes drunk,
even if he becomes drunk, for example, if a man is so drunk that he's not able, under law, he's not responsible. He will say he's acting out of, independent of his will. He's not responsible for his action. It depends on the level of drunkenness. People still drink, maybe they don't become so drunken, okay? But even if that is going to happen, it would have been apparent, Those are all about rules of procedure, okay? The emphasis that I'm making is that if he becomes drunk, it's not a reason to suspend a legislator, You can, for example, discipline him, advise him or whatever.
So you don't see any circumstance under which the National Assembly or any legislative house can say, you, this lawmaker, you haven't quite conducted yourself in a proper manner, and we think that you should be on suspension for a while.
No, the issue, there may be other ways by which a legislator can be disciplined. But the issue we're talking about now is suspension. In other words, denial of the right to participate. The point I'm emphasizing is that when you're looking at it from the standpoint of Mr. Noja, you're looking at it from the standpoint of the person, as if he's representing himself. He isn't. And let us also appreciate that a whole lot of discipline over a legislator is the prerogative of his constituency, not that of the legislative house. Because If it goes to the National Assembly or the legislative house to misrepresent his people, then there are several means by which they are empowered by law to take it. One of it is, for example, recalling him. Okay.
That's the only one that people know of. They don't know of any other one. Either recalling him or either not voting for him or her in the forthcoming elections. I don't know of any other way that the people can punish their lawmaker.
But that, again, shows you the fundamentality of representation. The fact that the law largely constrains and limits removal of the legislature to a very limited extent. Okay? So, are there other ways? For example, if it's convicted, you know, the law, the Constitution provides that once you are convicted, there's a limit to freedom of representation. So what I'm in essence saying is that there are guides and guards. Because if we don't follow those guards, the power of the legislature, for example, the head of the president of the Senate, can easily become like a wild river without embankment. You can, for example, say that because, there is a contest over a woman, you know, and then you take an action. Or you can influence the process through his power. So the essential issue that must be understood is that, and this has been subjected to decisions of the courts. You know, I think there was one in Bauchi, I think Dana, against House of Representatives, and which the Court of Appeal said, the legislative house in Nigeria has no power to suspend. And many times, the House, the National Assembly will say, we're exercising the power under the investigatory authority under Section 88 of the Constitution. But even those powers are limited to their constraints.
I'm struggling to remember the case now, but there was an instance where a court of law was approached, and the Court of Law said that the National Assembly could suspend, but not for more than 14 days.
That is in the case, that's the case in which I think it was Dino Melaye's case. Was it not in Dino? There was a case in which...
It was in Senator Ali Ndume's case.
Okay.
Where...
only recently?
Only recently.
Was it in Senator Ali Ndume's case?
And the Supreme, and the case, currently, the Senate has appealed that matter. That matter is currently on appeal. It is instructive to note, and this is where I find, and this is what I would refer to as the very existence of a double standard. It is interesting to note that the Ethics and Privileges Committee that recommended the suspension of Senator Ali Ndume had Senator Omoagege as a member. Now, this is where I have issues. Where's the approbation and reprobation coming from? The exact same punishment that Senator Omoagege, as member of a committee, recommended for somebody else is being applied to him. Same process. Suspended for 181 legislative days.
But I think in that rules of order, it was 14 days. There was a provision that can be suspended only for 14 days.
Which is what the Senate, it is one of the issues that the Senate has put on appeal, and is saying that the rules that we specified did not say specifically that it can be no more than 14 days. And that we believe that our rules give us latitude to extend the suspension over and beyond 14 days. That is one of the grounds of the Senate's appeal.
But then the question sorry to interrupt you. The question will be, what should determine the gravity of it? I mean, let's take a look at this matter, for instance, this current matter. It's very political in nature. You know, some people will say that there's nothing criminal about it. What warrants, for instance, the Ethics Committee saying that a legislator should go home for 181 days, and then, you know, okay, it's been reduced to 90 days now, but what sort of situation should warrant that? Do you think that even if at all the Senate did have powers to suspend the lawmaker, I mean, which is still under contention, or they could do that, should they be able to do that in political matters?
But the point is that, in essence, you have said that people will not have representation for that period of time, when the Constitution, as an organic principle, says they must be represented.
No, the point is, Mr. Bayomi, I'm assuming without conceding, let us assume that the Senate can indeed suspend, let's say that they had the powers to. Should it be restricted to non-political matters, say matters of conduct, matters of criminality and things of the sort?
That's precisely the problem. There's no measuring standard. There's no gauge. When you have a power that is not controlled, that is not guided by principles, you've got a problem, because where do you really decide the limits of that power? Now, going back now to that case, if I remember clearly, the court even in that case didn't say that the National Assembly can suspend. It rejected that suspension, and then it drew the attention of the National Assembly to the fact that at any rate you are suspending for this period of time. Even under your order, it's only 14 days. So they have, in essence, exceeded their power. So if the point is that, we can suspend, and we even have 14 days, they expand it. So when you have a power that is not contained or controlled, the tendency is to abuse. And that is why I keep saying that in the democracy, everything is controlled by law. Even lawmaking is controlled by law.